Hello friends. So we have been so far considering the time dependent mechanical behavior of the materials at high temperature. So we defined this time dependent response of a material at high temperature to a given mechanical condition in terms of stress. We refer to that as creep behavior. So far what we have been discussing were all along these lines. We talked about a representative creep curve. We saw the mechanisms or the material behavior that is responsible for each of these stages within the creep. We looked into a different creep mechanism depending on the variables that we assume to be, or depending on the parameters that we assume to be constant. So those parameters are the stress and temperature. And in the previous lecture, we moved away from the steady state condition to that of the transient creep. We moved away from the steady state creep to that of the transient creep. So if you look at a representative creep curve, which includes strain along the y-axis and the time along the x-axis, in keeping with our description of the creep behavior, you could see that this representative curve would look something like this. And when we want to discuss in terms of the life of a material at a given temperature, then we would largely focus on the creep rate at the steady state condition. So this plays a vital role when we want to consider the life of a material. However, when we want to talk about the strain exhibited by the material during its application at high temperature, then we have to consider the transient creep rate. So this we saw in our previous lecture. We saw there are two types of transient creep, high temperature and low temperature, and depending on the temperature or the relative high temperature and relative low temperature, the dependence or the expression for the transient creep rate will vary. So each of these different high temperature transient creep and low temperature transient creep has its own expression, and the high temperature transient creep we saw as a power law expression that was already captured by Andrade, and the low temperature transient creep has a logarithmic expression, and that's the reason why we refer to it as the logarithmic creep. So now we are nearing the end of this type of discussion, wherein we have been considering the time dependent mechanical behavior of the material at high temperature. So we will, in the few lectures onwards, we will be talking about the failure of the material at high temperature. And since we are nearing the end of time dependent mechanical behavior of the materials, now we will be considering the creep as a whole and the factors that govern the creep as a whole. So in the previous lecture, we saw the effect of stress and temperature on the creep behavior as the whole. However, these were largely confined to the steady state creep rate, and this we arrived at by considering the different mechanisms of creep. So we considered different mechanisms of creep, and those mechanisms gave us a relation between the steady state creep and stress and temperature. So based on that, we were able to identify what is the effect of stress and temperature on the steady state creep rate. So in this lecture, we will be studying or looking into the other factors that influence the creep behavior of the material. So in this lecture, we will be focusing largely on polycrystalline material. So polycrystalline material, these polycrystalline material, they are generally categorized by, or they are characterized by rather, they have individual grains, which are sometimes referred to as the bulk, and they have grain boundaries, and they have triple points or triple junctions. So these are the features that typically characterize a polycrystalline material. So these features typically characterize a polycrystalline material. Now, in this polycrystalline system, there is an exclusive factor that is associated with this polycrystalline system that has an influence, a noticeable influence on the creep behavior of the material, and that is what we are going to look in this lecture. Now, in a polycrystalline system, when you want to talk about the mechanical property, the grain size, it governs the mechanical property, and we have a definite relation for it, and we refer to that relation as Hall-Petch relation. So the grain size of the grains has an effect on the mechanical properties of the polycrystalline material. Now we want to see how the similar grain size, or what are the effects of the grain size on the creep behavior of the material. So that is what we will be looking into in this lecture. We want to look at what are the effects of the grain sizes on the creep behavior of the material. If you could recollect, when we talked about the instantaneous creep range. So when we talked about the instantaneous creep, or the definition of the creep, wherein we said that with time, or the definition of creep wherein, or we defined it as the mechanical behavior that is dependent on time, or the behavior of the material to a loading condition that is dependent on time. We introduced a new behavior, or we talked about a different behavior that does not play into elastic or plastic behaviors. So we refer to that as the anelastic behavior. If you could recollect, while we were defining, or while we were introducing what a creep is, we began with the discussion on anelastic behavior. And when we were talking about the different stages of creep, we associated that this anelastic behavior, we associated this anelastic behavior with the instantaneous creep. So let us revisit what this anelastic behavior is. If you, the anelastic behavior is nothing but there is a lag when you release the loading within the elastic region for the material to get back to its original position. So in case of elastic, if you load the material and then, or in case of elastic behavior, if you load the material and you unload it, the material will resume back to its original position almost instantaneously. However, in case of anelastic behavior, this reversal is not instantaneous. It takes some time, and we attributed, or we reasoned that this anelastic behavior is because of the grain boundaries that are present in the polycrystalline material. So you have in a polycrystalline material, supposing you have a polycrystalline material something like this, and you have your grain boundaries. This is not a typical polycrystalline material, let us assume it to be one. So you have different grains and you have your grain boundaries. Now these grains have a definite arrangements of the atom, particularly within a crystalline system, and the grain boundaries, they do not share that similar crystalline nature or the crystalline arrangement of the atom, and therefore if you consider just the grain boundary alone, you can treat it as an amorphous material. And this amorphous material, or the way amorphous material respond to a stress condition, is significantly different from that of the crystalline material, and that is the reason why we attributed that reason to the anelastic behavior. So the whole of the behavior or anelastic behavior of the material is stemmed from the response of the grain boundaries to the combination of stress and temperature. Of course, this is an elastic behavior, or some sort of an elastic behavior. You would have the reversal of the material or the sample to its original position, but it is a delayed reversal. So this is what we refer to as the anelastic behavior. Now this behavior is largely confined to the elastic deformation of the material. We do not move away from this elastic deformation, or we do not move away from the elastic response of the grain boundary, or we did not move away from the reversal of the material to its original position. We did not talk about the influence of grain boundary when we move into the plastic deformation regime. So let us do that in terms, or by considering the temperature or the effect of temperature as well. So whatever we saw in the anelastic behavior, it was largely associated with the polycrystalline material, it was largely associated with the grain boundaries, but it was confined to the elastic deformation. The whole of the description and the material behavior that we considered was confined to the elastic regime. Now let us move away from the elastic regime, meaning let us move away from the instantaneous creep, wherein we largely observe this anelastic behavior, to the overall creep behavior of the material. Now if we move away from the overall creep behavior, move away from the instantaneous creep to the overall creep behavior of the material, then we would have irreversible effect of grain boundaries. So we would have irreversible effect of grain boundaries. So GB as the grain boundaries. Now the reason for this irreversible effect is similar to that of the reason why the grain boundaries would introduce anelastic behavior. So the reason for both the anelastic behavior and the irreversible effect of grain boundaries in the whole of the creep behavior within the plastic region is is the same, meaning it all depends on how the atoms are arranged in the grain boundaries. Now in the bulk of the material or within the grain, you have crystalline arrangement of the atom, not so much in the grain boundaries. Now what happens is that when you have an amorphous like arrangement or a non-crystalline like arrangement of the atoms along the grain boundaries, then you have entered a stress region, or you have entered the plastic region and moved away from the elastic region at high temperature. What happens is that this amorphous like grain boundaries, the grain boundaries without a definite crystal structure, begins to slide. So when you have a grain that is sharing, two grains sharing a grain boundary at high temperature, this amorphous like grain boundary, which is largely non-crystalline in nature, at high temperature and at stress condition that renders plastic deformation, this grain boundary, it begins to slide. And this phenomenon is referred to as the grain boundary sliding. Now what happens is, this grain boundary, which is like an amorphous material, now when you raise the temperature and when you have a condition that induces plastic deformation, unlike the elastic deformation, the grain boundaries begins to slide, or the grains begins to slide along the grain boundaries. Now this in a sense would enhance the plasticity, because the grains are allowed to move with respect to each other, and thereby when you have a dominant grain boundary sliding, you would observe a large amount of strain in that material. When you allow, or when the grain boundary sliding is dominant, you would see there is a definite amount of, or an increased amount of strain or increased plasticity within the material. Now so far we have been referring to the grain boundary as non-crystalline region within the polycrystalline material. We are referred to as the amorphous region within the polycrystalline material, or it is a region wherein you don't find a definite arrangement of the atoms. However, to quantify or to give a specific nature, or to identify a specific nature of what the grain boundary is, or what is the influence of the grain boundary on creep at high temperature, people have carried out some experiments wherein they have worked on polycrystalline systems wherein grain boundaries sliding is dominant. So they have considered polycrystalline system, they have considered appropriate stress and temperature that renders a dominant grain boundary sliding, and when they calculated the creep rate exhibited by dominant grain boundary sliding, they arrived at a relation that was similar to that of Newtonian viscous flow. So this is Newtonian viscous flow. So what we have is, when you have a system wherein there is a dominant grain boundary sliding, of course this is a polycrystalline system and you are considering a condition with appropriate stress and temperature, and when you calculate the creep rate of that system, which is largely governed by grain boundary sliding. So when you calculate the creep rate exhibited by the system in this definite stress and temperature condition polycrystalline system, the rate that you get is similar to that of the one you would observe in a Newtonian viscous material. And therefore this grain boundary during grain boundary sliding acts as a viscous Newtonian fluid, and that is the reason why you have a different behavior in a polycrystalline system. So what it means with respect to the grain size, supposing your grain size is smaller, then the density of the grain boundary proportionately increases. Therefore the effect of the grain boundary sliding is also more pronounced. So the effect, so let us term this or shorten this as GBS. So the effect of grain boundary sliding, it increases as the grain size decreases. So the reason for it is, as you decrease the grain size, the amount of grain boundaries for a given unit volume, it increases, or the density of grain boundary, it increases, and therefore the grain boundaries at a condition of a given stress and temperature, it begins to slide, and therefore having a pronounced effect of grain boundary sliding on the overall creep behavior. Now this grain boundary sliding in some cases can be advantageous, in some cases it cannot, it is not advantageous. Now cases wherein this grain boundary sliding is advantageous is the superplasticity. So one of the factors that causes the superplasticity is the grain boundary sliding. So since the grain boundary acts as a viscous fluid, a Newtonian viscous fluid at a given set of temperature and stress, particularly in the plastic regime, in certain instances, and given that it significantly enhances the plasticity of the material, intentionally the size of the grains is reduced in a polycrystalline system in order to enhance the plasticity and thereby achieving superplasticity. So the advantageous outcome of the grain boundary sliding, if it is controlled, then you would have superplasticity. Whenever or when you don't have factors to control the grain boundary sliding, if the grain boundary sliding is not monitored, then it will lead to a greater amount of strain and ultimate failure. So it will lead to a greater amount of strain and ultimate failure. So supposing you have an application wherein you have components that are devised to work close to one another, and because of this grain boundary sliding, if you have a greater deformation in one of the components with respect to the other, this ultimately leads to the failure of the whole of the machine. And in that cases, you would have this offers you a negative effect of the grain boundary sliding. So grain boundary sliding, when monitored, when regulated, you would have it render or offer you a superplastic behavior. However, when it is not monitored, when it is not governed, or when it is not intentionally introduced, it will ultimately lead to the failure of not only the material but the overall component wherein this material is used. Now, this grain boundary sliding is largely governed by the creep or the strain rate we have in the creep testing. So this grain boundary sliding, in addition to the number of or the grain size of the grain size that characterizes the polycrystalline system, in addition to that, the grain boundary sliding is also influenced by the strain rate. So when you have a condition wherein you hold the stress to be constant and there is a differing strain rate within the material, then depending on the differing strain rate, the role of the grain boundary sliding will also vary. For certain strain rate condition, the grain boundary sliding might be dominant. For certain other condition, the grain boundary sliding might be less dominant. Now we have already seen the strain rate, particularly in the steady state condition, is governed by stress and temperature. And given that this strain influences the degree of the role played by the grain boundary sliding, so ultimately it is the combination of stress and temperature that governs the dominance of grain boundary sliding. To revisit, the grain boundary sliding, in addition to the grain size of the material, is also influenced by the strain rate. That is strain rate that is observed within the material. Now the strain rate, if you could recollect during our discussion on the different mechanisms of creep, we saw that it is influenced by the stress and temperature. So the stress and temperature through the strain rate influences the grain boundary sliding. Now how does the strain rate influences grain boundary sliding? So let us look into it. Now the easier way to translate the strain rate during the steady state creep is as accumulation of stresses. So the strain rate can be translated to the accumulation of stresses. So this is stress here, accumulation of stresses, meaning for a given duration of time, when you have a larger strain rate, then there is a larger accumulation of stress. When you have a lower strain rate, then there will be a lower accumulation of stress. Now when we talk about the accumulation of stress, let us begin by considering a lower strain rate condition. So when you have a lower strain rate condition that is introduced by the appropriate combination of stress and temperature, you begin by having a lower strain rate condition. So that means the accumulation of stress is also proportionally lower. Lower accumulation of stress. Now under such a condition, when we talk about the accumulation of stress under the lower strain rate condition, the accumulation largely happens along the grain boundaries. So what happens is that when you have a definite strain rate and through that strain rate you introduced a plastic deformation, and plastic deformation is largely the nucleation and propagation of the dislocation, and when these dislocation propagate and hit the grain boundary, they largely begin to accumulate, because again this is a slow strain rate condition, therefore the effect of stress is also largely reduced. So you have the accumulation of dislocation, or the plastic strain is largely confined to the grain boundaries. Now therefore the effect of the strain or the strain rate or the effect of the accumulation of stress is largely felt along the grain boundary. So in both these grains, so you have your grain 1 here and grain 2 here, the accumulation of stress is largely confined to that of the grain boundaries, and this accumulation of stress then enhances the grain boundary sliding. So at low stress and low accumulation of stress, which is rendered by low strain rate, there is the accumulation of deformation, plastic deformation along the grain boundaries. This is when you compare it to the bulk of the grain, there is an accumulation of stress along the grain boundaries. Now, like I said, in the low strain rate condition, we have a low stress acting on the material, so therefore the dislocations are fairly easy to move within the bulk of the material or within the grain, and only they get impeded when they reach the grain boundaries, and along the grain boundaries they get accumulated and thereby rendering the accumulation of stress. So this all occurs under low strain rate condition, which can be translated to a low stress condition or low accumulation of stresses. Now when you compare the bulk or the grain to that of the grain boundary, the accumulation of stress along the grain boundary is much greater, and this consequently enhances the grain boundary sliding. So in addition to the viscous behavior of the grains, you have now the stress acting to that, or accumulation of stress acting on it, thereby enhancing the grain boundary sliding. Now it is important to note that this is, we say that it enhances the grain boundary sliding, or the grain boundary sliding is more pronounced here. We say that because we are comparing the grain to that of the grain boundary. So when you compare grain to that of the grain boundary, the accumulation of stress along the grain boundary under low strain rate condition is higher, and that is the reason why we say under low strain rate condition we have enhanced grain boundary sliding. Supposing we have a condition wherein the accumulation of stress along the grain boundary, accumulation of stress, I hope you are able to discern this, it's stress. So accumulation of stress along the grain boundary and the grain are of the same order, so they are comparable, they are not very much different. So you have accumulation of stress and accumulation of stress along the grain boundary, and the bulk of the grain, they are more or less the same. So under this condition, what would we expect? Now we saw the accumulation of stress only when it is large. When you compare it to the grain, we have the enhanced grain boundary sliding. When that is not the case, you have more or less equal accumulation of stress, and the only contributing factor in that case would be just the viscous behavior of the grain boundaries. So therefore, you would have under such a condition wherein the accumulation of stress is comparable in grain boundary and within the grain, then the only factor contributing to the grain boundary sliding is the viscous nature of the grain boundaries. So we don't have any contribution from the accumulation of stress as we observe in the low strain rate condition. So in that case, when you compare to the low strain rate condition, when your accumulation of stress is more or less comparable with grain boundary and grain, then the grain boundary sliding is less enhanced, or the only contributing factor is the viscous behavior of the grain boundaries. And this is what we observe in the high strain rate condition. So in the high strain rate condition, the accumulation of stress is comparable with or comparable between the grain boundary and within the bulk of the grain, and the only factor that contributes to grain boundary sliding is the viscous nature of the grain boundaries, and therefore when you compare to the low strain rate condition, the grain boundary sliding is less pronounced on the high strain rate condition. So just to recollect it in a comparative manner, you have your high strain rate and you have your low strain rate condition. So these are differentiated by the accumulation of stresses. So accumulation of stresses occurs here at the grain boundary, here it occurs at both grain and grain boundaries. So when you have accumulation of stresses, so this is accumulation of stress. So when you have accumulation of stress along the grain boundary, then your grain boundary sliding is governed by both viscous behavior of or viscous nature of the grain boundaries, and it is also governed by the accumulation of stress. So you have both contributing to the grain boundary sliding. However, in case of high strain rate condition, the grain boundary sliding is solely governed by the viscous nature of the grain boundaries. So therefore, here when you compare between the high strain rate and low strain rate condition, under the low strain rate condition you have the enhanced grain boundary sliding. So this is the influence of strain rate on the degree of grain boundary sliding that we observe in a material. So far what we have seen is there are two factors that contribute to the grain boundary sliding within a material. So one of the factor is the size of grains. So this is the material parameter, or rather the property of the system. So the system, the polycrystalline system, maybe the average grain size of the polycrystalline system might vary, and depending on the average grain size, the effect of the grain boundary sliding varies. So when you have a finer grains, you have an enhanced grain boundary sliding. Now, the other effect or the factors that govern the grain boundary sliding is the combination of stress and temperature through the strain rate. And within the material, the strain rate is translated to accumulation of stresses, and therefore when you have lower strain rate, the accumulation of stress enhances the grain boundary sliding than the higher strain rate. Now, based on the current description of the grain boundary sliding, it will be easy for you to guess what would be the influence of temperature alone on the grain boundary sliding. So we fix the grain size or average grain size of the polycrystalline material, we fix the stress or the mechanical condition imposed on the material, and we vary the temperature. So based on our understanding, you would now be able to discern or guess or make an educated guess. So what would be the effect of temperature on grain boundary sliding? Now the effect of temperature of course will enhance, or the temperature will enhance the grain boundary sliding, because with increase in temperature, the way when you talk just in terms of the nature of the grain boundary, that is when you talk in terms of the viscous nature of the grain boundary, as we have observed when you relate the creep rate that you observed that you see when you have a grain boundary sliding dominant behavior, the grain boundary acts as a Newtonian viscous material. Then with increase in temperature, this becomes the grain boundary sliding. When you talk about just the nature of the grain boundary, it becomes more and more enhanced. So this is one way of explaining the effect of temperature on the grain boundary sliding, that by truly talking from the perspective of the nature of grain boundary. Just by considering the nature of the grain boundary, just by treating it as a Newtonian viscous system, you could say with increase in temperature, the grain boundary sliding is enhanced. The other way of talking about is through the mobility of dislocation. Now, if you could recollect, when we talked about the rearrangement of dislocations within the grain, we saw that when these dislocations are arranged in these manners, or when they polygonize, we termed this as a subboundary. I hope you are able to recollect that. So when you have a definite arrangement of the dislocation, you have a formation of the subboundaries. Now, similar way, we can treat the grain boundaries as we have treated it as the viscous system. We can treat the grain boundaries as certain arrangements of the dislocation. We can say the grain boundary comprises of a huge amount of dislocation. Now, with increase in temperature, like in the bulk, the dislocation or the mobility of the dislocation that is associated with the grain boundaries, so those are referred to as the grain boundary dislocations, so GBD in some books. So the mobility of this grain boundary dislocation is also enhanced. So that means at high temperature, in addition to the viscous flow of the grain boundaries, given that the mobility of the grain boundary dislocation is also increased, the effect of the degree of grain boundary sliding will also increase. So the effect of temperature on the grain boundary sliding can be argued from the atomic arrangement within the grain boundary that makes it look amorphous or viscous fluid. The other way the effect of temperature on the grain boundary sliding can be argued is by considering the mobility of the grain boundary dislocation. Now, when we talk about the mobility of the grain boundary dislocation, the activation energy for the mobility of the dislocation along the grain boundary is much less than that of along the or within the bulk of the grain. So that is the reason why with temperature it becomes easier for the dislocation to propagate more along the grain boundaries than the bulk of the grain. So the effect of temperature, we can attribute that effect to the nature of the grain boundary and to that of the mobility of the dislocation. Now, in addition to these effects, that is the effect of size of grains, the effect of the stress and temperature through the strain rate, and the effect of temperature alone, there are other factors that offer or that dictate the degree of grain boundary sliding. So one such factor is the shape of the grains. Now, the shape of the grain is also influence the degree of grain boundary sliding we observe in a material. Now, when we talk about the shape of the grains, there are various ways to characterize it, there are various ways to quantify it. We will stick to what is commonly referred to as the grain boundary aspect ratio, or rather grain aspect ratio. So what we want to do is we want to understand the influence of the shape of the grains on the grain boundary sliding. Now, there are different ways one can characterize the shape of the grains. One way is to see how much phases are associated with each of these grains, but we will stick to a simpler consideration, that is the grain aspect ratio. Now, the grain aspect ratio is nothing but the ratio of the length along the direction wherein the tensile load is acting to that of the length along the direction wherein the compressive load is acting. Supposing let us consider a simple grain such as this within a system, and along this direction you have your tensile load that is acting, and along this direction you have your compressive load that is acting. Maybe this could be because of the Poisson's effect. So under such a condition, the grain aspect ratio is expressed as the ratio between this length here. So let us, the length in red, let us call that as LT, to that of the length here, that is LC. So the grain aspect ratio is nothing but the ratio of LT by LC. So LT is the length along which the tensile load is acting, and LC is the length along which the compressive load is acting. Now the sliding is enhanced by the tensile loading. Supposing I have here another grain. So if I have the arrangement of grains in this manner, now the sliding would be along the direction of the tensile loading. So in this arrangement, the sliding would be along the direction of the tensile loading. So that means when I have a larger grain aspect ratio, that means I have sufficient room for the sliding of the grain boundary. So when the length of the material, or of the grain rather, along the tensile direction is greater, then I have sufficient grain boundaries for the sliding phenomenon. So therefore, when I have a larger grain aspect ratio, the grain boundary sliding is enhanced. For the case of larger grain aspect ratio, wherein I have the sufficient grain boundaries present for the sliding phenomenon, then the grain boundary sliding as a whole is enhanced. So this is only when you have your tensile direction that is along the grain boundary which is allowed to slide. So that is introduced by the consideration of the length along the tensile direction. So therefore, when you have a larger grain aspect ratio, given that you have a sufficient grain boundaries that can slide, you would have an enhanced grain boundary sliding. Now when you have a rather low grain aspect ratio, so this would look something like this. So yeah, something like this. So when you have a setup something like this, then what would happen is there is not much room for the grains to, or the grain boundary to slide, and the triple junction here, it acts as an obstacle for the grain boundary sliding. So you have two triple junction, and this would act as an obstacle for the grain boundary sliding. This triple junctions, they impede the grain boundary sliding, and therefore the role of grain boundary sliding is significantly reduced when you have low grain aspect ratio. When you have a low grain aspect ratio, meaning the length along the compressive loading direction is significantly greater than the length along the tensile loading direction. So this length here, which is in blue, as you can see, is significantly greater than the length, say, along the tensile loading direction, green. Then you would have an impeded grain boundary sliding, and therefore the grain boundary sliding is not is not that much dominant in such a material. So therefore, depending on the shape of the grains, the grain boundary sliding or the degree of grain boundary sliding varies. For the grains of smaller aspect ratio or the lower aspect ratio, meaning you have a greater length along the compressive loading direction, in those cases, because the area available for the grains to slide is reduced, noticeably you have a restricted grain boundary sliding. On the other hand, when you have a larger grain boundary aspect or other grain aspect ratio, wherein the length along the tensile loading direction is significantly higher than that of the compressive loading direction, then you have enough room for the grains to slide, and thereby you have enhanced grain boundary sliding. So we saw the effects of several factors on the grain boundary sliding. We began by considering the grain size, the conventional or the one that we would expect, the influence of the combination of stress and temperature through the strain rate. The other is exclusively the influence of temperature on the grain boundary sliding, and now the effect of the shape of the grains on the grain boundary sliding. So we will wind this lecture up, or this discussion on the grain boundary sliding, by considering the effect of the size of the material, rather the dimension of the material on the grind boundary sliding. So we want to consider the effect of the dimension of the material on the grind boundary sliding. Now the reason why the dimension of the material plays a role in the grind boundary sliding is because, as we have seen here, the sliding of the grind boundaries is impeded by the triple junction. So whenever you have a grain that blocks the sliding of the grind boundaries, your sliding is rather restricted. However, in place of the grain, so in place of a grain that impedes your sliding of the grind boundary, if you have a free surface, then the grind boundary sliding it has a degree of freedom to move along that direction. So to put it simply, within the bulk of the material, within the material wherein you have the grind boundary sliding impeded by another grain, this effect or the dominance of the grind boundary sliding is rather restricted. However, when you have a free surface, then the grind is allowed, or the grind boundary is allowed to slide further. So the free surface will not impede the grind boundary sliding, whereas within the grind, the triple junction and other grinds, they impede the grind boundary sliding. So therefore, when you consider a thin plate, the effect of grind boundary sliding will be larger than when you consider a thicker plate. So when your grind boundary sliding effect, or when your grind boundaries are large, are in contact with the surface to a greater degree, then you would have a pronounced effect of grind boundary sliding. So the effect of the dimension of the material on the grind boundary sliding is dependent on the interaction between the grind boundaries and the surface. Now, when the grind boundary interacts with the surface, or when you have a grind boundary sliding that reaches the surface does not impede the grind boundary sliding, it allows it to progress further. So therefore, when you have a greater interaction between the grind boundaries and the surface, you have enhanced grind boundary sliding. On the other hand, the degree of interaction between the grind boundary and the surface is not as much as pronounced, then you have rather restricted grind boundary sliding. So these are the factors that govern the grind boundary sliding. So one of the factors that you would not expect is the influence of the dimension of the material on the grind boundary sliding, and the shape of the material or shape of the grinds on the grind boundary sliding. Now, given that for a definite combination of stress and temperature, this grind boundary sliding can be dominant. The grind boundary sliding at times are referred to as the mechanism of creep. So if you could recollect, the way we arrived at different mechanism of creeps is through the combination of the stress and temperature. We saw for definite combination of stress and temperature, we have definite creep mechanism that is operating. Now, the similar behavior is observed in the grind boundary sliding as well, meaning for a definite combination of stress and temperature, we have a dominant role that is being played by the grind boundary sliding, and for this reason alone, the grind boundary sliding is at times treated as the a separate creep mechanism. So far, to wind this lecture, let me just recollect what we have seen so far. We have seen the grind boundary sliding or the grain size as an effect on the creep behavior of the material. The effect is through the grind boundary sliding, and this grind boundary sliding can sometimes be advantageous, like in case of superplasticity, or in some cases it can be disadvantageous, wherein you observe the extensive deformation of the material and ultimately failure of it. Now this grind boundary sliding, depending on the way you want to proceed with it, you can influence the grind boundary sliding through different factors. So one of these factors, of course, is the size of the grains. When you have a reduced size of the grain, you increase the amount of grind boundaries, and thereby you enhance the amount of grind boundary sliding. The other is the combination of stress and temperature, and therefore we have the influence of strain rate on the grind boundary sliding. When you have a low strain rate, you have the accumulation of stress along the grind boundaries that enhances the grind boundary sliding. If not, the strain rate is, or the accumulation of stress because of the strain rate is more or less similar in both grain and the grain boundaries, and therefore at high strain rate condition, you don't have any enhanced grain boundary sliding. So at low strain rate condition, because of the accumulation of stress along the grain boundaries, you have enhanced grain boundary sliding. And the temperature, or the effect of temperature on the grain boundary sliding, is rather straightforward. With increase in the temperature, you have the increase or enhanced grain boundary sliding. This is because, it could be because, or we could argue it based on the nature of the grain boundary, and also by treating grain boundary as the combination of dislocations and in terms of the mobility of the dislocation. And we saw in all these factors, which we have considered in previous contexts as well, except for the grain size, the shape of the grain also plays an important role in deciding the degree of grain boundary sliding. So whenever you have a definite shape which renders a high degree of grain boundary interaction between the neighboring grains, then in those cases you would have an enhanced grain boundary sliding. So if you take a simpler case like this, when your length of the grains along the tensile loading direction is greater, then you would have higher degree of grain boundary sliding when compared to the grains wherein the length along the compressive loading direction is higher. Now finally, we saw the dimension of the material also plays, or the dimension and shape of the material also plays an important role in governing or in dictating the degree of grain boundary sliding. Meaning, when there is a larger interaction between the surface and the grain boundaries, you would have enhanced grain boundary sliding when compared to a restricted interaction. So with this, we will wind this discussion on the grain boundary sliding, and we will move to different behavior of, or different high temperature behavior in the next lecture. So we will see ourselves next time. Goodbye.